Forward base, Hale sat like a forgotten fortress at the edge of the Hindu Kush, where Afghanistan met nothing but wind, stone, and endless white. Christmas Eve. The temperature had dropped to -20°C, cold enough to freeze diesel fuel in its lines, cold enough to make breathing feel like swallowing razors. Lieutenant Aria Kane stood on the watchtower, M200 intervention rifle slung across her back, watching snow fall in curtains so thick it erased the mountains. The base was quiet. Most personnel had gathered in the mess hall for whatever passed as holiday cheer in a war zone. Aria had declined. She never did well with crowds, especially not on Christmas. She was the last of SEAL Team 7 from the original deployment. The others had rotated home, been reassigned, or were buried under white crosses at Arlington. That was why they called her the Last SEAL. Not because she was the final member standing, but because she had survived when no one else thought she would. Operation Blackwater, 11 months ago. Ambush in the Korengal Valley. She had been the only one to walk out. Her radio crackled. Commander Hayes, gruff and direct as always. Kane, briefing room, 5 minutes. She climbed down from the tower, boots crunching through fresh powder. The briefing room smelled like burnt coffee and old sweat. Hayes stood by a digital map, his weathered face illuminated by blue light. Around him, 6 operators from the new SEAL Team 7. Aria knew their names, but not their stories. She had stopped learning stories. Intel just came through, Hayes said, pointing to a route marked in red. Weapons convoy moving through Kargan Pass. RPGs, heavy machine guns, maybe worse. If it reaches the Valley network, we lose any chance of interdiction. The room went quiet. Kargan Pass was a death trap even in summer. In winter, during a blizzard, it was suicide. We go in light. 4 vehicles, 2 teams. Kane, your overwatch. Find high ground and keep us covered. Aria nodded. She was always overwatch. Snipers watched. That was the job. They rolled out at 2300 hours. The storm had intensified, turning the night into a whiteout. Aria rode in the second truck, checking her gear for the 100th time. 408 Shaytak rounds. That was all she had grabbed before the rapid deployment order. 3 shots, she would have to make them count. The convoy moved slowly through the pass, headlights barely cutting through the snow. Aria felt it before she heard it. The wrongness, the silence that was too quiet. Then the world exploded. The first IED went off beneath the lead vehicle, flipping it sideways in a column of fire and shrapnel. Before anyone could react, machine gun fire erupted from both sides of the canyon. Muzzle flashes sparked through the snow like angry fireflies. Aria's truck swerved hard right. She felt the impact before she heard it. RPG. The vehicle lurched, rolled, and Aria was thrown clear, tumbling through snow and rock until she slammed into something solid. Her head rang. Blood ran hot down her temple, freezing almost instantly. She forced herself up. Around her, chaos. Men shouting, gunfire rattling, Hayes yelling orders that were swallowed by wind and violence. Aria reached for her rifle. Still there, still intact. She tried to move toward the team, but the snow shifted beneath her feet. Avalanche. Not a big one, just enough. The mountainside collapsed in a rushing wave of white, and Aria went down with it, swept away from the convoy, from the team, from everything. She clawed at the snow, trying to swim, trying to breathe, but there was only cold and pressure and darkness. When she stopped moving, she was buried up to her chest in a drift 100 meters from the ambush site. She could hear the firefight, but could not see it. The storm and the snow had swallowed her. Aria dug herself free, every movement agony. Her radio hissed with static and fragments of voices. Hayes, then someone else, then screaming, then nothing. By the time she cleared the drift and crawled to a vantage point, it was over. The convoy was destroyed. Bodies lay motionless in the snow, and she watched, helpless, as figures in winter camouflage dragged her teammates away. Not dead, captured. They loaded them into trucks and disappeared into the storm. Aria was alone again. She woke in a snow hollow, shivering so hard her teeth rattled. The storm had buried her again while she lay unconscious. For a moment she thought about staying there, letting the cold take her. It would be easier than what came next. Then, her radio crackled. Anyone, this is Hayes. We are captured coordinates. The signal was faint, broken by interference, but it was there. They were alive, and they needed her. Aria forced herself up. Her body screamed in protest. Ribs cracked, shoulder dislocated. But the rifle was still functional. She checked it methodically, like she had been trained. M200 intervention. 51 inches of cold weather precision. 3 rounds of 408 Shaytak ammunition. 3 shots to save 7 men. She built a shelter using her pack and snow, a technique learned in Arctic survival training. Compact, insulated, just enough to keep her core temperature stable. She melted snow for water, ate an energy bar that tasted like cardboard and regret. The radio burped static every few minutes, fragments of conversation. Someone was interrogating Hayes, demanding access codes, information about drone flight patterns. Hayes was resisting. Aria heard the dull thud of impacts, the sharp crack of bone. She had to move. Now, Aria checked her compass. The trucks had headed northeast. That meant they were probably using one of the old Soviet outposts scattered through these mountains. She had studied the maps before deployment. There were 3 possibilities within 5 kilometers. She would check them all. The storm was her ally now. It hid her movement, covered her tracks, masked her thermal signature. She moved like a ghost through the drifts, following intuition more than evidence. A sniper's sense. The same instinct that had kept her alive in Korengal. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time lost meaning in the white. Her thoughts drifted to her brother, Marcus, also a SEAL, killed in Helmand Province 3 years ago. They had spent their last Christmas together at their mother's house in Montana, drinking bad eggnog and arguing about football. She had promised him she would make it home. She had not kept that promise, but tonight she could keep a different one. The tracks appeared suddenly, half filled by new snow but still visible. Wide tires, heavy vehicles. Aria crouched, studying the pattern. 2 trucks, maybe 3. They had passed within the last hour. She followed them north, moving parallel to the trail to avoid mines. The wind howled, throwing ice crystals that stung like needles. Visibility was down to 30 meters. In some ways, that was good. If she could not see far, neither could they. The radio crackled again. This time, clearer. "Tell us the access codes or we kill your youngest first." A voice she recognized. Wilson, 23 years old, new to the team. He had joined just 6 weeks ago, fresh from training, eager to prove himself. She heard him trying to be brave, heard the fear underneath. Aria moved faster. The mountains were a maze of ridges and valleys, all identical under the snow. But Aria had been trained to navigate by something more than maps. She watched the wind patterns, the way drifts formed, the subtle shifts in terrain. And she noticed something else. Heat signatures. Faint, almost invisible, but there. Engine exhaust. Wood smoke. She climbed a rocky outcrop, ignoring the fire in her shoulder, and glassed the area with her scope. Through the blizzard, she caught a glimpse of structures. Old Soviet barracks, 3 buildings arranged in a triangle, smoke rising from a metal chimney. Target acquired. Aria settled into position, studying the compound. Guards outside, moving in pairs. Maybe a dozen hostiles total. Her team was inside the central building. She could not see them, but she could feel them. The same way she always knew where her spotter was without looking. The smart play was to call for backup. Wait for QRF. Extract safely. But the radio was jammed. And backup was 2 hours away, minimum. Her team did not have 2 hours. Aria checked the time. 0340. Christmas morning. She thought about midnight mass at the chapel on base. About the chaplain reading from Luke, peace on earth, goodwill toward men. There would be no peace tonight. Inside the central building, Hayes could taste blood. They had been working him over for an hour, methodical and patient. His right eye was swollen shut, 3 ribs broken. But he had not talked. None of them had. The interrogator was a calm man with cold eyes and careful hands. He spoke perfect English with a Moscow accent. "Commander, you are prolonging the inevitable. Give me the drone access protocols and I will make this quick. Refuse, and your men die slowly, starting with the boy." He gestured to Wilson, who was zip-tied to a chair, face pale but defiant. Hayes met Wilson's eyes. The kid gave a tiny shake of his head. "No, do not give them anything." "Admirable," the interrogator said. He drew a pistol, pressed it against Wilson's temple. Last chance. Hayes closed his eyes. Prayed for the first time in years. Not for salvation, just for time. One more minute, one more second. The interrogator's finger tightened on the trigger. Outside, Aria heard the threat through her radio, heard the finality in the interrogator's voice. She had run out of time. The problem was distance. She had found the only elevated position with line of sight to the compound. Ridge 23, a knife edge of rock overlooking the valley. But it was far, very far. Aria ranged it with her scope. 2,900 meters, nearly 2 miles. The longest confirmed kill in history was 2,700 meters, made by a Canadian sniper in ideal conditions with a support team and million-dollar equipment. Aria had a blizzard, damaged gear, and 3 bullets. She set up her rifle, using her pack as a makeshift bipod. The wind was gusting, variable, impossible to calculate accurately. She watched the snow patterns, the way the storm moved. Estimated windage. Elevation. Bullet drop at this range would be extreme. The round would fall nearly 20 meters before reaching target. Through her scope, she could barely make out the building. The window was a dim rectangle of light. Inside, shadows moved. She had 1 shot, maybe 2 if the first missed. But if she missed, Wilson died. If she missed, they all died. The mathematics of the shot scrolled through her mind like a death sentence. 2,900 meters. Wind gusting 15 to 25 knots from the northwest. Temperature, -20 Celsius. Altitude 8,000 feet. Each variable compounded the difficulty exponentially. At this distance, the bullet would take nearly 4 seconds to reach target. 4 seconds for the wind to push it off course. 4 seconds for gravity to pull it down. 4 seconds for the target to move, for the storm to shift, for 1,000 tiny factors to turn a perfect shot into a miss. Aria ran the calculations again. Adjusted for Coriolis effect, for air density, for the slight cant of her rifle on the uneven rock. She had done this 1,000 times in training, 100 times in combat, but never like this. Never at this range. Never with this much riding on a single trigger pull. Her spotter was dead. Her equipment was damaged. Her body was broken. Every rational part of her brain screamed that this was impossible, that she should call for backup, wait for support, play it safe. But Wilson did not have time for safe. Hayes did not have time for backup. The mission did not care about rational thought. Aria closed her eyes for 1 second. Not to pray, not to doubt, just to remember why she was here, why she kept coming back to these frozen mountains, these impossible situations, these moments where everything hung on the edge of a blade. Marcus had once asked her that question, 3 days before he deployed to Helmand Province for the last time. They had been sitting on the porch of their childhood home in Montana, watching snow fall over the Rockies, drinking whiskey that was too expensive for either of their salaries. "Why do you do this?" he had asked. "The SEAL thing, the sniper thing. You could have been anything, doctor, lawyer, hell, you were smart enough to be an astronaut. Why this?" She had not known how to answer then, but she knew now. She did this because, when the world tilted toward chaos, when good people were about to die, someone had to stand between them and the dark. Someone had to take the shot that no one else could make. Someone had to carry the weight that would break anyone else. That was why she was the last SEAL. Not because she survived, but because she refused to let others die. Aria opened her eyes. The world snapped back into focus. Crosshairs, wind, distance. Mathematics and instinct merged into something beyond training, beyond thought. She became the rifle, became the bullet, became the impossible made inevitable. Aria's breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The world narrowed to the scope, the crosshairs, the impossibly small target. She made her corrections, adjusted for wind, distance, altitude, temperature, then adjusted again based purely on instinct. Through the static on her radio, she heard the interrogator cock his pistol. Aria exhaled, held, found the space between heartbeats, squeezed. The M200 bucked against her shoulder. The sound was swallowed by wind before it could echo. The recoil sent pain screaming through her damaged ribs, but Aria held position, tracking through her scope. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. The bullet was still in flight, crossing nearly 2 miles of storm-torn air, dropping, drifting, fighting physics and probability. Inside the building, the interrogator began to squeeze the trigger. Then his head snapped back. The window shattered, and he dropped like a puppet with cut strings. For one frozen moment, nobody moved. The room was silent, except for the wind howling through the broken window. Hayes stared at the body, at the neat hole where the man's left eye had been. Then chaos erupted. The guards panicked. They had heard no shot, seen no muzzle flash. One of their own had simply died, struck down by something invisible and impossible. They shouted at each other in Russian and Pashto, weapons raised, looking everywhere and nowhere. Aria did not give them time to think. She fired again. The guard at the door went down, throat torn open. Third shot. The man fumbling with the radio, trying to call for backup. He fell across a table, scattering maps and ammunition. 3 shots, 3 kills, all at 2,900 meters in a blizzard. Aria dropped the rifle and started running. Inside, Hayes did not waste the opportunity. The remaining guards were scattered, disorganized, terrified. He threw himself sideways, snapping the chair he was tied to, and drove his shoulder into the nearest hostel. They went down together. Hayes got a hand on the man's knife, slashed through his zip ties, then turned the blade on his captor. The rest of the team followed his lead. It was brutal, close quarters, desperate, but they had surprise and rage on their side, and within 90 seconds, the room was secure. Hayes grabbed a rifle from one of the bodies and moved to the window. Through the storm, he saw a figure descending the ridge, moving fast, alone. Kane, he breathed. Aria hit the compound at a dead sprint. The remaining guards had finally organized themselves, taking up defensive positions. Bullets kicked up snow around her feet. She dove behind a rusted truck, breathing hard, ribs screaming. The door to the central building flew open. Hayes appeared, rifle up, laying down, covering fire. Behind him, the rest of the team spilled out. Wilson was limping, but mobile. They all looked like hell, but they were alive. "Kane! Status!" Hayes shouted over the gunfire. "Hostile reinforcements inbound. We need to move now." They fell back toward the tree line, firing and moving in a disciplined retreat. The enemy was close behind, and Aria could hear vehicle engines starting up, pickup trucks mounted with heavy machine guns. If those got rolling, they were dead. The compound erupted in coordinated chaos. Searchlights swept across the snow, cutting through the blizzard like white knives. Aria counted at least 15 hostiles pouring out of the remaining buildings, weapons raised, shouting commands. The team was outnumbered 3-1, low on ammunition, and running on adrenaline and desperation. "Contact left," Wilson shouted, dropping to a knee and firing controlled bursts. 2 hostiles went down, the rest scattered for cover. Hayes coordinated the retreat with hand signals, years of training overriding exhaustion and pain. The SEALs moved in pairs, leapfrogging back through the snow, laying down suppressive fire to keep the enemy pinned. But the distance to the tree line was too far, and the hostiles were gaining confidence. A rocket-propelled grenade streaked past Aria's head, close enough that she felt the heat. It detonated against a rock outcrop, showering them with stone fragments. Her ears rang. Blood trickled from a fresh cut above her eyebrow. Hayes took a round in the leg and went down hard. Aria was there before he hit the ground, hauling him up, his arm across her shoulders. He was heavy, dead weight, and her injured body wanted to quit. But quitting was not an option. "Leave me," Hayes grunted through gritted teeth. His leg was bleeding heavily, dark blood staining the snow beneath them. "Not a chance, sir. You're walking out of here if I have to carry you myself." Rivera appeared on her other side, taking some of Hayes's weight. Together, they dragged him toward cover, while the rest of the team provided covering fire. Bullets zipped through the air, close enough to hear the supersonic crack as they passed. They made the tree line just as the trucks roared to life. Aria dumped Hayes behind a boulder and turned back. The lead truck was accelerating, DSHK heavy machine gun swinging toward them. The weapon could tear through trees like paper. If it opened up, they would be shredded. "Smoke! Now!" Aria shouted. One of the SEALs, a demo specialist named Rivera, pulled a smoke grenade and threw it. The canister bounced once, twice, then erupted in a massive cloud of white that blended perfectly with the blizzard. Visibility went to 0 instantly. The trucks slowed, unwilling to charge blind into possible mines or ambush. That hesitation bought them 90 seconds. 90 seconds to disappear into the forest, to put distance between themselves and death. They moved fast, despite injuries, despite exhaustion. Survival instinct pushed them forward when training and discipline were not enough. The forest was dense with pine and birch, branches heavy with snow that dumped on them as they crashed through. Aria led them north by compass, toward a rally point she had memorized from the mission brief. An old logging road, abandoned decades ago, where helicopters could land. Behind them, the enemy pursued. She could hear engines revving, men shouting, dogs barking. The hostiles knew these mountains. They had home field advantage and superior numbers. But the SEALs had something more valuable. They had desperation. And they had Aria Kane. She set a punishing pace, navigating by memory and instinct. Every few hundred meters she would stop, check their back trail, adjust their course. The team followed without question. They trusted her. That trust was a weight heavier than any pack. An hour passed. Maybe two. Time became meaningless, measured only in footsteps and breaths. Hayes was fading, losing blood despite the tourniquet. Wilson's limp had worsened. Rivera was coughing, each breath rattling in his chest. They could not keep this pace much longer. The enemy pursued, but the storm was thickening. Engine sounds faded. Searchlights swept through empty woods. After an hour of hard movement, Aria allowed them to stop. Wilson dropped to his knees, gasping. Hayes sat against a tree, leg wrapped in a hasty tourniquet. The rest of the team collapsed into the snow, exhausted beyond words. Aria checked her radio. The jamming had stopped. She keyed the emergency frequency. Overwatch to any station. This is SEAL 7 actual. We are 7 souls. Mobile, requesting immediate extraction. Over. Static. Then, a crackle. 7 actual. This is baseplate. Authentication confirmed. QRF is inbound. Hold position. ETA 20 minutes. 20 minutes. They could hold for 20 minutes. They set up a defensive perimeter in a shallow depression, using fallen logs and snow as cover. Rivera and another SEAL named Thompson took first watch, scanning the forest for movement. The rest of the team collapsed, letting exhaustion claim them for a few precious moments. Wilson was shaking, not from cold, but from delayed shock. The medic, a quiet man named Chen, wrapped him in an emergency blanket and checked him for wounds. Minor cuts, bruises, but nothing life-threatening. The kid had been lucky. They had all been lucky. Luck and Aria Kane. Hayes watched her from where he sat, back against a tree, leg throbbing despite the painkillers Chen had given him. She had moved to the perimeter, rifle ready, eyes scanning, always watching, always ready. She never stopped, never rested. Like a machine built for one purpose. But she was not a machine. Hayes had seen the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. Had seen the haunted look in her eyes when she stared at nothing. Aria Kane was human. She just refused to let that humanity slow her down. "Lieutenant," Hayes called softly. She looked back, eyes sharp, despite the exhaustion written in every line of her face. "Take 5. That's an order." For a moment, he thought she would refuse. Then she nodded, moved to where he sat, and lowered herself to the ground with a barely suppressed groan. Up close, he could see the damage, bruises darkening her face, blood crusted in her hair, the way she held her left side, protecting broken ribs. "You should be medevaced first," Hayes said. "So should you, sir. We both know that's not happening until everyone else is loaded." They sat in silence for a moment, listening to the wind through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The enemy was still out there, still hunting. "That shot," Hayes said quietly. 2,900 meters. How did you even see the target?" "I didn't. Not really. Just knew where he had to be. Rest was math and prayer." "Math and prayer," Hayes repeated. "That's one hell of an equation." Aria almost smiled. Almost. The helicopters came in low, Black Hawks skimming the treetops, rotors throwing up massive clouds of snow. Aria could hear them before she saw them. That distinctive thump, thump, thump that meant safety, extraction, survival. The sound of salvation. The team marked their position with an infrared strobe, invisible to the naked eye but bright as a beacon through night vision. The lead Black Hawk circled once, confirming the landing zone was secure, then dropped fast. The moment the skids touched snow, The crew chief was waving them forward. Go, go, go. They loaded Hayes first, then Wilson, then the others. Aria went last, as always. She kept her rifle trained on the tree line until the crew chief physically pulled her into the bird. The Black Hawk lifted off immediately, climbing hard and fast, banking away from the valley. Below, she could see figures emerging from the forest. Too late. Always too late. The second Black Hawk fell into formation beside them, and together they raced east, following the rising sun. The crew chief offered Aria a headset, but she declined. She preferred the silence, preferred the roar of the rotors that drowned out thought. Aria sat on the floor of the bird, back against the bulkhead, watching her team. Wilson had fallen asleep almost immediately, head tilted back, mouth open, face finally peaceful. The kid would have nightmares later. They all would. But for now, he could rest. Rivera was staring at nothing. That 1,000-yard stare that every combat veteran knew. Seeing things that were not there. Remembering things he wished he could forget. Chen was methodically checking his medical kit, taking inventory, preparing for the next mission, always the next mission. Hayes was getting patched up by the crew medic, gritting his teeth as they worked on his leg. The wound was bad but survivable. He would walk with a limp for the rest of his life. Small price for breathing. Thompson and another operator named Bradford sat shoulder to shoulder, not speaking, just existing in that shared silence that came after combat, when words were inadequate and presence was enough. 7 men. All alive. All breathing. All going home. Hayes caught her eye across the cabin and mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Aria just nodded. Words felt inadequate. Everything felt inadequate. She had saved them, but it did not feel like victory. It felt like survival. It felt like she had simply delayed the inevitable, because there would be another mission, another ambush, another impossible shot, and one day, her luck would run out. One day, the mathematics would not add up. One day, she would miss, but not today. Today, 7 men were alive who should not have been. Today, she had kept her promise, to her brother, to herself, to every person who had ever depended on her. The helicopter banked east, and through the open door, Aria saw the sun rising, first light on Christmas morning, turning the snow-covered mountains gold and crimson. It was beautiful, the kind of beauty that made war seem obscene. They landed at Forward Base Hale just after 0600. The base commander was waiting on the pad, along with a medical team. Hayes was loaded onto a stretcher immediately. The others were triaged, treated, shuffled away. Aria walked away from the commotion, toward the empty watchtower. Nobody tried to stop her. They knew better. She climbed to the top and sat on the frozen platform, rifle across her lap. The storm had finally broken. The sky was clear and impossibly blue. Afghanistan stretched out in every direction, harsh and indifferent and strangely serene. Someone climbed up behind her. Rivera. He sat down without asking, held out a thermos. Coffee. From the mess. It's awful, but it's hot. Aria took it, sipped. He was right. It was terrible. 2,900 meters, Rivera said quietly. In a blizzard. That's impossible. Necessary, Aria corrected. Hayes said you saved us. Said if you hadn't been out there, we would all be dead. Aria did not respond. She watched the sun climb higher, melting frost from the guardrails. You know what day it is? Rivera asked. Christmas, Aria said. Yeah. Merry Christmas, Kane. Merry Christmas. Rivera left her alone after that. Aria sat on the tower until the sun was fully up, until the mountains stopped being gold and became their normal gray-brown. She thought about her brother, about promises kept and promises broken, about the weight of survival. Later, there would be debriefings, medal ceremonies, a formal report describing the shot as tactically significant, the longest confirmed kill under combat conditions, a record that would stand for years. But right now, Aria Kane was just a soldier sitting on a watchtower, drinking bad coffee, watching another day begin in a war that never ended. She whispered to the wind, words only she could hear. Merry Christmas, Marcus. I kept my word. The snow had stopped falling. The war had not. But for this one moment, on this one morning, 7 men were alive who should not have been. That was enough. That had to be enough. 3 weeks later, Commander Hayes stood in the base commander's office, legs still in a brace, reading the after-action report. The analysis was clinical, precise, distance confirmed by satellite imagery. Wind speed, temperature, bullet trajectory, all calculated and verified. The shot was mathematically improbable, bordering on impossible. But it had happened, and 7 men were alive because of it. "She's refusing the medal," the base commander said. "Says she was just doing her job." Hayes smiled slightly. That sounded like Kane. "Where is she now?" "Same place she always is, watchtower, alone." Hayes nodded. Some people were made for crowds, for celebrations, for recognition. Aria Kane was made for the cold and the dark, and the distance between a rifle and its target. She was the last SEAL. Not because she was the only one left, but because when everyone else fell, she was the one who stood. When hope was lost, she was the one who found it. When the shot was impossible, she was the one who took it anyway. And she would keep standing, keep watching, keep taking the impossible shots, because that was what she did. That was who she was. The last SEAL. The legend would grow. Stories would spread through the teams, through the military, through the intelligence community. About the sniper who made an impossible shot on Christmas morning. About the woman who walked through a blizzard to save her brothers. But Aria Kane would not be there to hear them. She would be on another mission, in another war zone, behind another rifle, doing what she always did. Watching, waiting, ready. Because wars do not end on Christmas. Soldiers do not get to go home just because the calendar says they should, and some people are built to carry burdens that others cannot imagine. Aria Kane was one of those people. And she would carry her burden until the day it finally broke her. Or the day she decided she had carried it long enough.